Glember, The Tale of a Monster. Written, recorded, and illustrated by A.K. Brookman. Chapter 12. Sparing the Gargol. I turned the tip of the spear away from Glember, diving to the side to dodge another of the yellow-white fireballs. Like the first, it exploded against the earth, searing everything in its path for a great distance before it dissolved. Glember was rising to his feet. As I motioned at him with the spear, he was looking toward the wizards. Indeed, I could see from their clothing and the light of their magic who they were. They double their efforts each time, Glember said. From 2 to 4 this time, he mused aloud. What do they want? I asked. Why are they trying to kill me? The Gargol looked toward me and blinked. They are after me, human, he answered, and they will kill you because you are with me. What? I asked. They are wizards of Nye, I protested. And yet I had to leap aside once again to dodge another of the searing orbs. I began to yell out to them, waving my arms frantically. The orbs continued to come. I found myself backing away as they approached. They had no desire to chat. It was their intent to kill me, or more likely, they could not discern in the night's gloom that I was human. To the ravine, Glember shouted. What? I asked. What did you do, Glember? I asked. Why are they after you? Because I am Gargol human, Glember answered, pulling a key from his pack. Because I was born, and because I still live. That makes no sense, I argued. Glember held the key up so I could see it. You will not escape them with that pack on, he said. I'll remove it. I backed away from him as he approached. I didn't trust that monster further than I could kick his carcass. I dodged another of the flaming orbs. They were getting closer, and their attacks were becoming more difficult to dodge. Indeed, I could not hope to outdistance a child for long, let alone 4 wizards of Nye. Glember was still holding the key out for my view. I felt, as I had so many times since that day Glember took me from my home. I felt helpless. Perhaps with morning and the light of the day, the wizards of Nye would see that I was no Gargol, that I was his prisoner. Likely, they were here to rescue me, but were taking no chances in this darkness. Perhaps I could signal them with day or leave a message behind for them at some point. Until that time, I had no other choice. I turned the contraption toward Glember, hoping that he would be true to his words, hoping he would unfasten the contraption in chains. Days 35 through 37. For the next 3 days and nights, Glember and I navigated the winding ravine, keeping ahead of the wizards of Nye. Each day we gained ground, for their campfires were further away each night, and although I disliked the idea of heading further north toward Glember's home, knowing well where he had been taking me and why, we could not turn about. I had no way of informing the wizards of Nye who I was. Certainly, they would not bring me harm if they knew this. However, it was an unfortunate state I was in. How long had the land been terrorized by the Gargol hordes? I had no answer for that question, yet I was certain the wizards of Nye knew, just as they likely knew exactly what this Gargol was doing. Now and again, they informed this or that town of the terrorizing Gargol stalking the area. We often heard of those men found lifeless, choosing to ignore the heat of the wizards and suffering with the greatest cost for their ignorant night travels. That I had to side with a Gargol for the time being to keep my life was unfortunate. I could find no alternative. Do not think that I will ever again be your prisoner, I said, breaking the silence when we made camp on the 3rd night. I shifted the staff spear across my lap to emphasize the point. I could have slain you where you lay, I reminded him. That I let you live wins me my life back. Glember said nothing. He looked my way as I spoke and allowed me to finish with his attention given. Yet, when I was through, he turned and sat in silence. Not that it was ever yours to try to claim to begin with, I added sternly. It had been getting steadily colder as we traveled. Both the direction and the passing days were leading us for snows and heartless winds. We could be ill prepared if we did not soon find thicker furs. Had the chaos of the recent days not abode, we would still have the furs acquired earlier. Such was the fortune of this journey. Surely there is a way to evade them without continuing ever north, I reasoned aloud, although it was as much a question to Glember. The Gargol shrugged. There is little elsewhere to turn in these inhospitable lands, he said with a sigh. I'm afraid north is the only direction offered for many days. I let out an audible sigh. I'm sure you'd love that, Glember, I said, and continued, heading north, continuing on just as before. Glember turned and looked toward me as though he did not understand, although I know he certainly did. There is always the alternative, he said. To just end it now, I asked. Right? I prodded. How many times had he made that very statement, referring to me thrusting my arms forward to activate the mechanism that would pierce my back and take my life? You forget I no longer wear your contraption, I reminded him. The Gargol turned away and toward the earth in front of him where he sat. I meant to head south, he said. I don't know. Perhaps they will welcome you, he reasoned. Perhaps they will be friendlier than the last two. Whatever happened to the last two, I asked. Now I remember. You ripped the jaw off one of them and threw the other one over a cliff. I shook my head as Glember turned my way with a raised brow. Yes, I remember now, I said. There was a long moment of silence before Glember turned to face me with studying eyes. Do you remember what happened before I did that? He asked me. Perhaps I do. Perhaps I do not, I answered. The truth was, I could not recall any more than what I had just offered. Still, I knew he was holding back. I don't think he wanted me to know what the wizards were after him for. He had been reluctant to relinquish this for far too long. Glember only grinned. It was subtle and quickly fading, for the weight of his concurrent thoughts, yet it was there just long enough for me to capture it, despite the darkness and his distance from me. So why are they following you, Glember? I asked. For you consistently avoid such questions. You consistently keep things hidden and obscured, as though it gives you the upper hand. Glember was looking at his arm, as though he noticed a scratch for the first time. Answer me, Glember, I demanded. Why were you taking me to the Temple of the Eight Walls? Why are the Wizards of Nye following you? Why did you take me from my home and not someone else? Are we headed along the sacred paths my grandmother spoke of? Why do you stare off in the night, or when we reach certain places? Why do you hide your thoughts? Glember was quiet. You nearly died, Glember, I said. Twice. I took in a deep breath and released it. I nearly died, I added. Why in the earth and hells does any of it matter now? I asked. Just tell me. Glember pulled a long pointed and crude dirk from a concealed place in his clothes where it rested beside his lower leg. He hurled it my way, and it struck the earth just before my foot. I jerked it out of the way instinctively, although it would never have hit my foot. First, Glember said, don't ever assume I'm indebted to you. I could have slain you at any time, regardless of your supposed advantage. I retrieved the dirk from where it was impaled in the earth, and, before Glember could resume speaking, I threw it his way. Although I aimed for the earth just before his feet, I doubted I could strike anywhere near that. It clanged noisily against the earth and bounced over Glember's legs to skid finally to a stop some distance from him. He followed the dirk with his eyes, but never moved. He turned back to me. Second, he said, as though the outburst was mild, I'm not going to answer any of your questions. Why not, Glemmy? I asked. Are you afraid of a mere human learning your darkest secrets? I have no secrets, human, Glember said, as though my statement angered him. Perhaps it was how I addressed him. Either way, it was enjoyable to observe. Ask yourself those questions, he added. And I'm not your father, human, he said, with tension in his voice. I don't owe you a single answer. His voice held finality. I knew he would not relinquish anything more tonight. Some things, Glember added, you must learn on your own. Day 38. My brother once said, if you can view the world in the same way as that you see when you stare down into a stream, then you are closer to truth than any other. I used to wonder what he meant, and I suppose the meaning has changed me over the years. Yet it was on this journey that I felt for the first time I truly understood what he meant. You cannot see yourself when you look down into a stream. You see the opposite. I think he meant two things. I'm certain he did. That first, we should learn to love the world and view it as we do ourselves, but also that much of what we imagine to be in front of us is quite the opposite. That to see truth, we must realize that things are not what they appear. At times, the opposite of what we see on the surface is most true. As we traveled north and came to the end of the ravine, the glimpse ahead looked no more welcoming than that forsaken land we left behind. It seemed my only hope would be to outdistance the wizards long enough so that they would be resigned from the prospect of continued pursuit. I had hoped to change Glember. I had hoped to muster the courage to escape the clutches of this soulless forlorn journey. Yet nothing would come to pass as I perceived. I would not escape death in the Temple of the Eight Walls. Glember would remain true to his word. Forgive me if you were hoping for something, then, like me, you did not see as clearly as you should have. The answer lay scattered about the path before us each day, and we trampled these over until we learned them on our own. Perhaps it won't be too late for you. Perhaps. We found ourselves climbing a mountainside. All other paths plummeted to steep depths or rose to steep heights. It was plain to see there was no alternative but the dangerous mountainside path. Light snows began falling at frequent intervals throughout that day. We managed to snare a few rabbits whose skins now protected our feet, yet we had little else to protect us from the bitter winds. The campfire of the wizards was even further this night, yet it was there nonetheless. They had not turned back. Would they ever relent, I wondered. It was a long hike, yet I was convinced if I actually made the peak alive, the wizards would not follow. The climb was worth it for one attempting to save his life, yet I doubted the wizards would find it a worthwhile trek for no more reason than to capture or slay a monster. There is a cave off the path and nearly impossible to find, lest one knows exactly where it lay hidden, Glember said suddenly. If we can reach that place, we may be safe. We may? I asked. Glember shrugged in his characteristic way. Perhaps they know of the cave, he admitted. I am surprised they have made it this far. It makes me feel as though they have made the trek before, he explained. Honestly, you who have endured the perils of this treacherous journey, would you let live had you not my guidance? Indeed, I wondered the same. How did they pass the river of snakes or the flooded landscape there? How did they pass the firethorn beetles? How could they endure this charge of bears and beasts along the way? Glember must have quite the bounty on his head, I decided. And I thought I could change him. He had likely accrued quite a list of accomplishments for more capable men than I. Nevertheless, that we were covering ground more quickly than the wizards gave me hope that they were not as accustomed to this passage as was Glember. How well hidden is this cave? I asked. Glember nodded. You will see when we get there, he said. Then you can make your decision. My decision? I asked. Glember nodded again. Yes, he answered. For past that cave is a place where two mountain peaks converge for only a moment each 30 days before the earth shifts and moves them apart. If we do not pass it in 3 days, and at that very moment, we will be trapped on this side, prevented from passing for another 30 days. The wizards are, perhaps, 2 days' travel behind us now, I mused aloud. Glember shook his head in agreement. If they know of the pass, they may wait another day. If they know of the cave, they may wait there out of the weather. He seemed calm as he relayed this. If they know it well, they will know we could not have passed it already. They will know we are somewhere near, waiting to make the pass ourselves. So what else can we do but wait in the cave for 3 days, watching for the first 2 to see if the wizards yet advance? I asked. First, Glember said, there is another moment when the pass can be made that is 1 day earlier than the preferred moment to pass. Only one of perhaps 3 or 4 makes the leap alive on that early day, Glember said. That's reassuring, Glember, I said sarcastically. And those that do make it alive usually have broken legs, he added. Even more delightful, I said. And second, Glember went on, we could confront the wizards. I raised one eyebrow, the way my father used to. I'm sure that will do the trick, I said. Hello, great protectors of the realm, most honored wizards of Nye. I am Randall, and this is my Gargol friend Glember, whom you've hunted across all of Meristheria, and now the northern fars. Will you not join us to sup? At the very least, sip tea with us this night as we catch up on the wondrous events of the last hand's days. Glember looked to me and smiled. I believe it was the first time I had ever seen the Gargol genuinely smile. Sure, he grinned with sarcasm, or with the enjoyment of some plight I befell, yet this time it was different. Why are you smiling? I asked him. We'll probably both be dead soon, thanks to you. Yet you're smiling as though a jest with words can bring humor. Glember turned away. He looked toward the path ahead. After 38 days, he said, you finally tell me your name. I had not considered this. Friends meet with names, not strangers, not monsters. Well, don't ever use it, I said sternly. Those who call me by my name, I explained. They know me. They care about me. Glember shrugged. Perhaps Ranny, then, he said, in honor of the way you call me Glimmy. No, I said, shaking my head. Human is fine. Glember began to turn toward me, but then decided against it. Have it your way, Glember said and nodded. Ranny. Chapter 13. Shelter and the Rising Wolf. The cave was indeed hidden well, its mouth facing the opposite direction and over a ledge that appeared to descend in step fashion to the foggy depths below. The evergreens were growing sparser with each step, and I found it difficult to catch my breath. We stopped from time to time just to prevent ourselves from becoming winded until at last we reached the cave. It was much larger than it first appeared gazing down on the opening. Once within, the winds gave the mouth of the cave a soft whir that was actually a comfort. Many smaller channels branched out from the main chamber, some of which must have extended beneath the path we took climbing the mountain. Some of these ended abruptly, as though they might have been intentionally crafted personal chambers, while others, Glember warned, twisted and turned to lower depths and unknown dangers. Despite the wind come to call against the mouth of the cave, it was pleasantly free of chill not far into the cave, and we were happy to drop our packs and rest, quite weary from the travels. "So how much further is this shifting pass?" I asked Glember. "Not far," he answered. "We should be able to reach it without rest." I nodded. I had been dragged along by Glember up until now, and finally free of these clutches, or so it seemed. It now felt I was pushed along by the wizards of Nye in pursuit. Glember had not made mention of his original plans, and neither had I the desire to inquire of them. I hoped at this point that he would give up on his plans, that my act of kindness, even if it was to spare my own life, would convince him of the folly of his ways, that I was no heartless human for the sacrificing. The cave walls were covered in a crystalline residue that made it distinct from other caves I'd been in, yet it still reminded me of the cave my father used to take me to, the one I was in when I awoke to find Glember standing at the mouth as though guarding it from something. There was even a crevice that led away from the main chamber to some further room, much like the one my brother drew the Gargol claw in red so long ago when we were children. "So, do we wait here for 3 days and make that safe jump? Or attempt that leap the dangerous day before?" Glember asked. "For the wizards, should they continue their hunt, will be here just after that dangerous leap, I imagine. Certainly they will arrive before the perfect alignment of the pass." He looked at me. "We may get lucky. We could always cross after they do if they do not find this cave." I looked to Glember. "Why would I make the pass if the wizards already have?" I asked him. "I plan to go home. I've only come this far to find a way to evade them. When that is done, I'm going home, Glember." Glember said nothing else, although I thought I caught his eyes noting the spear as he turned away. Yes, it was beside me, as it had been the past few days. I'd not let it out of my sight. That Glember made no attempt to attack me in the night was surprising enough. I think he knew for the first time, and for the time being, that our paths aligned like the mountain peak pass soon would. When that changed, I wasn't sure he'd comply with any of my wishes any longer. The truth was, I don't think he had any better an idea than I as to how to proceed. He had little more knowledge than I on whether the wizards knew of this cave. He'd faced the 4 of them on his own were he to tie me up or kill me, and I would likely be in the same predicament. The dangers of leaping to a death were not as enticing, and I think we had both decided the better decision was to wait and learn if the wizards even knew of our hidden haven. "Sleep, human," Glember said. "I've no intention of bludgeoning you in your sleep, if that is your worry. Although," he turned to study me, "how did you manage to slip free of the ropes I placed on you back on that plain before the ravine?" I narrowed my eyes. "Are you serious?" I asked him. "I was out of those things long before you even fell asleep." I kept my gaze steady. "I thought you were joking when you placed them on me," I added. Glember watched me for a moment longer. "If you couldn't figure that one out, I've lost some hope in the cleverness of your Gargol," I said, leaning back. Glember seemed to be considering my words. He turned away from me, staring at the cave floor in front of him. After a moment he turned back to me, only to catch my steady and serious gaze. He turned away once again. I was certain he knew not whether I spoke the truth or not. "Where did you get that rock?" he suddenly asked, motioning toward the jagged flat rock I'd wedged into the end of the staff. "I pulled it out from under one of your ankles while you slept," I lied. "I think that was the only difficult part," I added, turning my head, as if in reflection. "I was certain you were going to wake as I carefully slid it out from under you, or as I forced it into the staff." I took in a deep breath and let it out. "You must have been exhausted, sleeping so deep as you did," I added. Glember asked no further questions. I think he was scorning himself. If it gave him cause to worry each night as he slept, I was the better for it. Let him toss and turn and awaken to each sound. The fatigue resulting from his restless nights would be a boon to me. This concludes part 9 of 17 of Glember, The Tale of a Monster. You're listening to the first book of the Meristherian Trilogy. Please subscribe if you like the content, where you'll have access to additional books. Feel free to support this channel by telling others about it. These books are free to listen to, as you know, and everyone's welcome here. Leave a friendly comment if you like. Again, this is AK. Thanks for listening, friends, and see you next time.